Welcome to Infinitely Irrational, where we discuss the real, eccentric, and complex history of mathematics.
Brought to you by Mathematical Expressions.
I'm your host, Natalie, the resident math nerd.
And I'm Kay, your researcher of weird things.
In this episode, we'll answer the following questions. How can hypnosis take your workouts to the next level? Is music the new aspirin? What do either of these things have to do with math? Let's find out. Our next irrational and eccentric mathematical story is about Hypatia, a mathematician who's been credited with everything from conics to planetary movement. But what is the truth?
What is truth, really? As we dig into these... This is true. That's for a later episode. So as we dig into these math peeps, we're learning that history is not really a static thing. It's not, oh, here is a fact, and that's going to be the fact forever and ever and ever. Instead, usually history is recorded by people who have their own personal agendas.
The victors!
Yes, and they put their own flavor text in there for all to read afterwards. And like Pythagoras, the sources about Hypatia's background tell super different stories. Very, very different. And I've thought for a long while about the best way to frame all of these differences. Pythagoras was kind of easy. Hypatia was a little harder. But I think they can be summarized in the titles of two works about her life.
Can I say the first one?
I think you'd better.
Yes. Here it is, guys. Hypatia, or The History of a Most Beautiful, Most Virtuous, Most Learned, and in every way accomplished lady, who was torn to pieces by the clergy of Alexandria to gratify the pride, emulation, and cruelty of the archbishop, commonly but undeservedly titled Saint Cyril.
That title really took a turn with the torn to pieces bit. And the
spoiler alert.
Right? Oh, I guess we should have said that before we read those titles out. Usually a book doesn't spoil itself right in the title.
In fairness, though, we've spoiled Lord of the Rings and Lost, so...
Yeah, but we're the worst spoilers ever because those things happened a million years ago.
So did this.
This is... Good point. Touché. So I have the second title.
Yes, say it.
The second title of her life is The History of Hypatia, a most imprudent schoolmistress, in defense of St. Cyril and the Alexandrian clergy from the aspersions of Mr. Toland, who is, of course, the author of the first title.
Because your one was a response to mine.
That's correct.
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, because the sources are so mixed on her life, we're going to make the theme of these episodes choose your own Hypatia, much like those choose your own adventure books where you kept your fingers, you know, in case you made a wrong choice.
I love those.
Yes, same.
Everyone cheated like that. I'm pretty sure if anyone out there knows what you're talking about with these choose your own adventure books, they know what you mean by putting your fingers in the different choices.
Every time I make a joke about choose your own adventure books, I say that, and I've got like half the people on the floor because they all did it.
Do you practice this before we get together to...
No, I
You tried that joke on a few other people before we got here?
No, I talk about choose your own adventure books. You know I love adventure.
This is true.
No, I don't practice these jokes before. But one time, so our police chief, I met him the other day, and he had some other new people that were working, and I was talking to him, and our building is kind of cool because you could go upstairs or downstairs, but the entrance is in the middle. And I said, it's like a choose your own adventure, but make sure you stick your finger, like, you know, in the page so you know where to come back. So anyway, all of them were laughing.
Your dog didn't like the joke.
He didn't like the joke.
That was him growling in the background. He was really like,
Maybe we can edit this out. No one will hear it. So anyway, with that being said, we'll present the different accounts of her life. And you, beloved listeners, can choose which Hypatia you think is the most historically accurate. Let's dive in.
Let's. So let me set the stage. Hypatia was born. She was born in 355 AD. Or actually, maybe she was born in 370 AD.
Who can say?
Who can say? This is not part of your choices. You can choose it as kind of a warm-up if you want for the actual choices that are going to come later. Sources disagree on when she was born, but most likely somewhere between those two times. She lived in Alexandria in Egypt, and her father, Theon, was a well-known professor of mathematics, which is where we come to our first choice.
Okay, so our first option, which is the one I choose to believe, is as follows. Apparently, her father, Theon, wished to create a perfect human being.
Eugenics.
Indeed. And he made sure, check this out, Hypatia had formal training in speech, rhetoric, and the power of words, including hypnotic suggestions through the proper use of her voice. It's kind of like,
What?
yes. You know what that made me think of? Ursula in Little Mermaid?
Oh, when she,
Where
has
she took
the shell in
yes.
I always wanted one of those.
Me too.
Because I have a terrible voice for singing. Mostly. I wasn't going to use it for any evil thing.
I just sang, so obviously I'm fine. But anyway, also she traveled abroad for over 10 years for her education, and she was treated like royalty everywhere. I guess probably because everyone knew her dad.
The only way to travel.
The only way to travel, business class, or no, I guess it'd be first class. I don't know. I'm not that rich. But her father also made sure not just to train her mind, but also her body every single day. And so she was taught to row, to swim, to ride horseback, and climb mountains. That's what I'm going to believe.
Okay, so I'm going to present the alternative version of her upbringing, which is that, just kidding, according to some of the scholars that I have read, we only have 5 sources about Hypatia's life, and none of them talk about her life before adulthood, and none were written by people who lived when she did.
Because the only reason is because they probably didn't work out.
Probably. She ran in different circles, literally.
Right.
So
they never would see her.
Correct. In addition to that, later texts use the earlier text as source material.
Like you do.
Telephone, right? We've seen this before. Anyway, they use that as source material, so the facts aren't really reliable. Also, by the way, the same scholar said there were no mountains by where she existed. So I'm gonna have to go on that one.
I thought you were gonna say that there weren't any mountains around, period, and then I was gonna get you because it's gonna be like, no, there are mountains that are old.
While I'm very intrigued by your choice, I'm gonna believe she was just she was a mystery. She was a mystery intellectual until she was an adult.
I'm gonna go with Terminator Ninja.
Because that's what it must mean if you do a lot of exercise when you're younger and train your mind.
Also be able to hypnotize people with your voice.
I think we should just build on our choices as the listeners build on theirs.
Okay.
So at this point, it's probably a good idea, now that we've determined her upbringing, her backstory, if you will. Now it's time, like in character...
Hypatia origins.
Right. Now, chapter 0. Now we're going to move on to chapter 1. That was our prelude. That was our just kidding beginner moment. So at this point, I think it's really important that now that we've chosen her character class, ninja or mysterious stranger, we will now design her as a human being.
Oh, like a paper doll?
Yes. Like a paper doll, except if you lived in... modern era, and then you would probably make the connection to a video game character creation along those lines. Yes, we're gonna design her
paper
at this
doll
point.
Or video game. Pick your poison.
Choose. So we have a few choices here about what she looked like.
What I'm gonna choose is sources go on and on about her beauty. They say that she was just a lovely creature to behold, and many men fell in love with her. And so I already, in my head, right, she's already an assassin. Tomb Raider, Salt,
assassin.
Mrs. Smith. That's where I'm going with this.
Your whole repertoire is Angelina Jolie. Is that the only gorgeous assassin you know?
I'm gonna have to Google for some more, but yes, off the top of my head, that's it.
She's cornering the market.
That's it.
There. Okay, so that's listeners, readers, I guess, for our Choose Your Own Hypatia book. That's your first option. Your second option is there are actually no surviving busts.
So unlike
Hypatia.
the long-haired, long-nailed Pythagoras bust, because you could tell his nails were
Correct.
his bust.
They made sure to carve out his hands. Yeah, we really don't know what she looked like other than what other people said. And like we've learned from Cleopatra, she wasn't actually this gorgeous drop-dead woman that everyone thought she was. More likely it was due to her personality and her charisma, and that's why people were kind of entranced by her. So that's the one I'm going to go with my mysterious stranger.
So at this point, we sort of know how she grew up, but what made her famous? A lot, actually, and we'll discuss that after a quick break.
You already have a strong mind. Want a strong body? If you want to shape up fast, use the Mathersize exercise program.
Climb the mountain, and go. Now stop. Divide by 4 and row the boat. Row the boat, let x equal y and solve. Swim the lake.
Strengthen and firm all muscle groups in only minutes a day. The work is strenuous, but easy and safe. With Mathersize, you'll feel great. This is a no-sweat deal at $59.95 with a 30-day money-back guarantee. You can do it! Consult a numerologist before beginning this or any exercise program.
Now let's get into some of what made her famous. But what did she do? Well, Hypatia was a philosopher mathematician, a writer, a teacher, and she had her hands in science as well. She was a true Renaissance woman, probably about a millennia before the Renaissance.
I liked your emphasis there.
And so one source on her life states that she was a better mathematician than she was a philosopher, and that people were often so impressed when she spoke of math that they were dumbstruck. And you know, when we first talked about this, so my husband and I are rewatching Mad Men right now, and all I can think of is this episode where my favorite character in the show, she's a secretary, they pull her into a focus group, and she says something really poignant, and the men look at it and they're just like, it's like watching a dog play a piano.
Oh
and
my gosh.
I know. And so I don't know if they were dumbstruck like that, or it could be a point in the favor of her hypnotic training because she's amazing.
True, or her beauty, which you want to believe in, that she was just so gorgeous. Perhaps they just couldn't think in her presence.
I like that better.
They could only bask in her
I'm going to
beauty.
change what I just said. Undo. Control Z.
Well, what's really interesting about this is that, so at the time, women were allowed to be educated. We talked about that with Pythagoras, right? They were allowed into the brotherhood / cult. That's why we weren't calling it a brotherhood. But they just weren't really as well known. Most of them did not become famous for their intellect, even though they were out there being educated as well, which meant that our Hypatia characters, regardless of which version we're choosing, they're pretty unique.
That's true. And so let's dig in a little.
Let's dig into the uniqueness.
She was a mathematician, but what did that mean at the time? Well, at the time, mathematics and philosophy were intertwined. Mathematics had 4 branches.
4.
4. Are you ready?
I'm ready.
Astronomy.
Okay.
Geometry. Music. And arithmetic.
I would have only associated 2 of those branches with math beforehand.
She had experience in every one of them except for music. But one source reports that she healed people by playing instruments.
One source does report that, but all other sources have reported that is bunk. So, much like
Weekly World News.
Much like Pythagoras' association with music and the strings likely did not occur.
I believe Pythagoras knew music.
In addition to that, astronomy and astrology, and we know astrology, right? That deals more along the lines with how the stars determine your
I am a
destiny.
Libra.
Congratulations. I'm an Aquarius. I'm glad we got that out of the way.
I feel
Good thing
so much
that's
better now.
established. So at this point in time, both astronomy and astrology were considered one science. And so there was this bond between science and religion. And that bond was math.
Nice.
So math could be used to calculate, and I'm quoting here, the locus of a soul born under a certain planet, and could determine where that soul would be in a future date. Like GPS.
Again, I'm a Libra. You can calculate where I will be, where my soul will be, because I don't know what planet I was born under.
Wow.
I know.
Way to go.
I think my husband took that class, though. He needed his natural science credit.
Did he? Yeah,
ask him.
I missed that one in the college offerings. My bad. Anyway, I would have been far more interested in math if someone sold it to me in that way.
But you know what? This also means that math and astronomy could be a slippery slope. Because math leads to astronomy, right?
Right.
Astronomy leads to astrology.
Correct.
which leads to divination, which leads to horoscopes. Naturally a no-no.
That's intense. So you're a mathematician. Do you do a lot of horoscopes on the side?
I don't want to answer that. I plead the fifth.
Oh, that's true. This was so divination and horoscopes would have been a bad thing. By the way, in
math
this
is
time,
a gateway drug.
is it really?
Yeah, it's like, I got some arithmetic for you. Stay off that geometry. Just leads to, I don't know, astrology.
Harder and harder math.
That, yeah. Ooh,
Pretty soon you'll be wandering around just asking random people to do math with you all the time, right?
You know what? We are going to talk about a mathematician in a future episode who does that.
Are you serious?
I am.
I cannot wait to meet this person. So we aren't just having fun here. This really was believed at the time, and it was respected. In fact, Damascus, who is one of those original writers about Hypatia's life, according to my version of her, one of the 5, he tells us that philosophers and mathematicians, essentially, they had winged eyes. They could see what other people couldn't. They could see demons and visions. They could see into the future. They could see in the dark.
You know that I'm going to believe that because night
I
vision
had a feeling.
and seeing into the future will also help her as a ninja assassin. Terminator.
You want to believe it just because it'll help your Hypatia character
Correct.
to become more uber.
Correct.
I have to believe that she probably did do a little numerology and star reading since they were so intricately connected at the time. So now our Hypatia characters are getting clearly into trouble at this point in time, right? I mean, she's a woman, regardless of which woman she is. She's a woman. She's getting famous for her intellect. She's doing math/divination.
She'll go to tea rooms and be like, let me read your tea leaves.
Correct. We don't know how far down this rabbit
don't
hole
know.
of math she went.
Who can say? Who can say? So we've talked about a lot in this episode. Our Hypatia character is built, and we've started to discuss some of what she did. But of course, this isn't the whole story. We'll pick up next time, aptly for our Choose Your Own Hypatia series, with her work as a writer. Yes! Thanks for joining us for today's episode of Infinitely Irrational. For more fun, the research and math behind this episode, visit us on the web at www.infinitelyirrational.com. This episode was edited by Mathematical Expressions. This episode was written and narrated by Mathematical Expressions and Kay. Research for this episode was compiled by Kay. See you next time!